Welcome back. So this is part 3 of my Going Long video series, and it touches on some topics that we're going to be dealing with in part 3 of the print part, that I'm publishing on Endurance Essentials for you. So I'm going to hone in to the key part of that section, and that is race day nutrition. And the key thing I want you to remember is you need to decide on your strategy and practice it well in advance. Now, if you're stepping up in terms of distance, you can bluff your way through an Olympic distance race, a T100, and most of the way through a 70.3. It's going to get pretty hard, that final 10K, if you're light on nutrition and you don't have your nutrition figured out. But the reality is, Ironman is such a long day that if you don't have your nutrition figured out, you're going to run out of gas somewhere during the event. And that's not the end of the world. You're just going to need to slow down, calm down, regroup, get some carbs in, and make sure you're not dehydrated so you can absorb those carbs properly. But hopefully, you're not going to run into that because you're going to follow these tips and you're going to practice what needs to be done on race day way before you get to the race. So, what's the first thing you need to decide on? Race day breakfast. What's your standard breakfast? If you are an athlete that typically does not eat before you train, you need to change that. You need to train your body to eat in the morning, and you need to figure out what you're going to eat, and you got to do it. And maybe you don't have to do it every day, but you certainly need to be doing it a couple times a week and before your longer days. So your body gets accustomed to that and you're used to knowing exactly what that intake is going to be. Now, the article is going to touch on some specifics in terms of what you can eat, but the easiest thing to say is, look, you got to eat at least 400 calories in the morning on the get-go before your long days. Myself, I can be up over 1,000 calories for my breakfast on a big day. So there's a big range. So with all the stuff we're discussing, depending on the type of athlete you are, how efficient you are, how large you are, there's a range. And these ranges are very big. And if you've started poking around on the internet, you'll see everything from people that are eating hardly anything to people that are eating just massive amounts. So with yourself, you need to give some thought to a couple things. What's your max? What's the maximum that you can be eating in terms of a breakfast or while training? Also, what's the minimum you can get away with? Odds are optimal is going to be between these two. So this is what you can figure out in training. Document what you're doing. Actually write it down because we are lousy at remembering what we actually eat. So you really have to make an effort to understand what's going in terms of fluids and calories. So you got that race breakfast started. Now, before the swim on race day, are you going to do anything? Are you going to take a gel? I've been training myself to take down, currently I'm at about 400 calories right before I do my longest swim of the week. Now, what I would like to do is get myself to the point where I can have 600 calories right before that swim. Why? Because that 600 calories can put me ahead in terms of my race. My race strategy involves a very relaxed swim. I recommend for most of you, your race strategy is the same. And if you're going to be relaxed, then you can be processing calories. When I raced Ultraman, that was a key part. If you're going to swim a 10K open water swim and then ride your bike 150K with some pretty solid climbs, you don't want to come out of the water depleted. What applies for Ultraman applies for Ironman too. You can put yourself ahead in terms of your nutrition if you have the ability to eat and tolerate that right before your swim, but you need to train it. If you haven't trained with a gut filled with fluids and a few gels or something on top of it, it's a strange sensation when you're in the water. You kind of feel like you got this gurgling stuff in your tummy, but it's very trainable. And we're going to need to train that later for the marathons. You might as well train it in all your sports. Next thing, T1. So you come out of the swim, and normally going horizontal to vertical is going to elevate your stress, elevate your heart rate response. And you need to have some workouts where you're going to do that, swim to bike, and to get the body used to that transition, to try and make that transition as low stress as possible. On the bike, what are you going to eat? Huge variation here. As a starting point, what I recommend for you is eat half your kilojoules. And I'm going to explain that to you right now. So let's say you're rolling along at 200 watts. Okay? 200 watts is 720 kilojoules of mechanical work every hour. 720. Half of that, 360. Okay? So 360, half my kilojoules, 360. So I want to be eating 360 calories as a minimum on the bike. Now, this is just a starting point because I've got friends who are much faster than me who eat less. And I've got friends that are slower than me and smaller than me, and they need less. So you really just get that starting point and you have to figure it out for yourself. Now, here's a caveat for you. Most athletes eat less on the bike than they plan, just because of the nature of the ride. So if you have a choice, I would train and set the target a little bit high and see how that goes. Likewise, when you get to the marathon, I've always kind of treated it like survival calories. It was more difficult for my body to process, and it was more difficult for me just to get them in. And that's even with walking every aid station to drop my heart rate and get what I needed on board, eating as I exit the aid station when my heart rate is at the lowest, and drinking at that point too. So think about it on the bike. That's your main opportunity. That's going to be the easiest time for you to process calories. It's the most stable. And a marathon is a long way to adjust if you happen to have gone a little too easy on the bike. So remember that. Likewise, that early part of the bike, if that heart rate just jacks up for whatever reason, you've got to mellow out and get that heart rate down, because that jacked up, unusually high heart rate is a sign of stress, and that will lead to impaired digestion. So you're going to have to get that under control before the fluids come in and the calories come in. I always used to start the bike with diluted sports drink. So the first thing that went in was fluids, diluted, so they weren't strong. The reason being is I wanted just to get everything moving. And then as I'm settled, I can then start getting into my routine and keeping myself topped up for fluids and also keep those calories coming in. Now, another thing for you to remember is your gastric emptying. So how fast the fluids are coming out of your gut. It's going to work best if your stomach is fuller. Okay? So you're going to need to fill up. So some of these spectacular chunders that we see from the elites on TV, their guts are full. Now, in some cases, unfortunately, they've had stomach shutdown. And if you think you've got stomach shutdown, you got to get your heart rate down fast and relax and get that digestion working again, because the race is too long to go through with your gut and everything all shut down. And I've dealt with it. It's tough to suck it up, but if you do suck it up, there's still a lot of racing left to go. So I've had problems midway through the bike where I had to back off, just get some plain water because maybe I got a little carried away with the amount of carbs I was putting down. And once everything got moving again, I was back in the game, and I've had excellent runs. So stay focused on that. Now, bike, pretty even in terms of ideally even with your output. You've got your calories in, you're setting yourself up for the run. Early part of the run. If you don't feel like eating or drinking, you need to make an assessment. How'd you do on the bike? Did you get your fluids in, and did you get your calories in? If not, you really need to address it in that first 10K, because it's only going to get more difficult to process later. So if you were light or you haven't peed for the entire race and you know, I'm probably a bit dehydrated, you've got to take it really easy out of T2. And what I used to do was give myself a bottle in my bag, and I would carry the bottle, and that would give me an incentive to get that bottle down, and that would slow me down and relax me a bit because I'm having to sip on my bottle so I don't go charging out of there and create stress on myself. So it's all about stress management in these transitions. Now, on the run, for me, it's primarily liquid calories. Okay? If you're going to be out there a long time, one of the things, and by long, I mean anybody, if you're going over 11 hours total, that is a really long time to be on sports nutrition, and your digestion might rebel. And it's tough to simulate being out that long in training. And so you should plan on needing some real food options, because if you're eating carbs all day, that sweetness, you'll get sick of that sort of sweet flavor. And so some real food on the bike mixed in, and practice this on your longer days, as well as maybe halfway through the run, can be helpful. PB&J, if you like that, those types of things. Potato chips, another one that a lot of folks like, that saltiness. Use the salt to drive your thirst so it's easier for you to get the fluids down. Now look, hopefully that's helpful. And we touched on sort of the key parts, and I gave you some ideas for addressing it. The final thing that I want you to train is the ability to run with a gut filled with fluids. And it doesn't come naturally to you, but talk to any ultra runner, and this is an aspect of their sport that they've had to train in themselves. So on that race simulation workout that I talked about in the first video, and also that I put in part 1 of the ongoing series on Endurance Essentials, I talked about that key race simulation workout. And what I said was I wanted you in training to drink 1 liter of a mixed carb protein drink before you did that transition run that I recommended. Remember to train the full gut. And on your long runs, this is something you can do as well. Halfway through the long run, take a little break, drink a bunch of fluids. What's a bunch? A bunch is at least a liter. With those nutrition simulations that I'm doing right now, before my longest master's swim, I'm up to 1.4 liters right before I get in the water. So I'm training my gut's ability just to handle a ton of fluid coming in and just relax, process it, work through it. You can do that on the run, and it is a very valuable skill to have if your fluids are down or if your energy's down, to take in a lot of either sports drink or a diluted sports drink, depending on what you need. But you got to train it, and you got to train it way before race day, and turn your nutrition into something which might be a source of anxiety, but turn it into a real strength of yours. So you're confident that no matter what happens, you've got a proven strategy to work through these challenges that you might face. Thanks for listening. More next time. See you at the races.